Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, I'll show you how to create this cartoon potted plant in Blender. I'll model the plant and the pot in 3D, and then I'll add the cartoon lines to it via the grease pencil object and a line art modifier. I'll then show you how to make a gradient and apply it to the world object, and then I'll use a grease pencil object to draw in the clouds. Hope you found this video helpful. If so, please like and subscribe, and let's get started. So here I'm in Blender, and I'm going to click into the viewport, and I am going to delete the cube. And over on the right on the outliner, I'm going to double click on the collection and name it to miscellaneous, so MISC. Then I'm going to right click and add a new collection. And I'm going to drag that out into the scene collection, and I'm going to double click on that and name it assets. Okay, and then I want to click one on my numpad to go to front orthographic. First thing I want to do is model the pot. So I'm going to hit Shift A, bring up an icosphere. Now with the icosphere selected, I'm going to hit Tab to go into edit mode. And up here at the right, I'm going to click and toggle on X-ray. So that way I can see through the model and I can select all the vertices on the front and the back. If I don't have X-ray enabled and I go to select vertices, it'll only select the ones I can see, so I won't be selecting those in the back. So I'll left click and drag and grab those and hit delete, and then vertices. Then I'll left click and drag and select the next layer. I'll hit S to scale, and then Z to only scale on the Z axis. I'll do that one more time. So S and Z. So now I've got that top flat. For the bottom, I'll select the bottom vertices and then the three above that. Then up here in the middle, I'm going to click on this button to turn on proportional editing. And what that means is when I go to pull up this bottom vertices, it will proportionally bring up other vertices with it based on an area of influence. So if I hit G, you can now see the ring around my cursor, and that is the proportional editing area of influence. So if at G, you can see I can grab and bring that up, but it's bringing too much up. So if I roll my mouse, I can reduce that area of influence. I'm going to turn off proportional editing and click and drag that last vertices, hit G to bring that up. Now left click and drag to grab all those vertices, and I'll hit S and Z to scale those and flatten those out. I'll do that again to make sure they're all flat. Now with those still selected, I want to hit Shift S and I'm going to say cursor to selected. You can see that brought my 3D cursor down to the bottom of those. I want to go back to object mode, and up here at the top, I'm going to hit Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor. So let me undo that so you can see what's going on here. Currently, the object's origin is in the middle of the object, and you can see that with this yellow dot right here. If you don't see that yellow dot, go up here to the top where this is the Show Overlays section. Click that drop down, and you can click Origins. So if I turn that off, you can no longer see it, so make sure that's checked. So if I do any transforms, they're going to happen at that origin. So I want the origin to be at the bottom because when I transform it, that's where I want them to occur. So like if I hit S to scale, you can see it's scaling from that origin. So I'll go to the top and hit Object, Set Origin, Origin 3D Cursor. Now you can see that yellow dot has moved to the bottom. So if I hit Scale now, it's going to scale from that spot. So with the object selected, you can hit N on your keyboard to open up the side menu. And here's our location for the object. And I actually want it sitting on the world origin because that's where I like to model from. So if I click into Z right here, I can hit 0. And that'll bring it up to even with the world origin. So I'm also going to click into X and change that to 0. So now you can see we're all zeroed out over here. So I'm going to turn off X-ray mode so I can get a better look at this. And then I'm going to hit Shift Z and I'm going to scale this up in the Z axis. So now I'm going to hit Tab to go back into edit mode. I'm going to hit Alt and left click to grab that top ring and hit S to scale it. So I'll bring that out a little bit. Then we'll turn back on X-ray mode and we'll click and drag and grab these and hit scale to bring those in a bit. And we'll do the same for the bottom. So now you can see we have our pot. I think this vertices right here is off a little bit, so I'm going to highlight it, hit G, X to constrain it to the X-axis and bring that over a little bit. I'm going to do the same to the top left. Hit G, X, bring that over. I'm going to come out of X-ray mode. I'm going to come out of edit mode, object mode. Now with the object selected, I'm going to double click on the name and change it to pot. I'll go to the modifiers section, click on that, click on add modifier and choose solidify. I'm going to scroll in so you can see this. So as I increase the thickness, you can see the pot walls increasing. So I just want to do a little bit of that. Now I'm going to click on this drop down and click apply. Then we'll go back to edit mode, turn on X-ray mode. I'm going to left click and drag to select all the vertices at the top of the pot. Hit SZ to scale those down so that they're even with each other. Turn off X-ray mode and come back into object mode. So that I can see what this looks like with the lines on it, I want to click into the miscellaneous collection, hit Shift A and go to grease pencil blank. So now I'm going to add the lines to the pot. So the new grease pencil object selected, I'm going to double click on the name and change it to lines. And then with the modifier selected, when the grease pencil object, I'm going to hit add modifiers and choose line art. So source type, I'm going to leave that collection. You could make it on a per object basis or the overall scene, but I'm going to leave it on collection. Then under collection, I'm going to choose assets. For layer, I'm going to choose GP layer and material black. And what that is if you see down here at the material section, there's our black material, which is now here in the material section, the layers. If I go to the grease pencil properties, there's the layer. So I'm going to bring the thickness down to 15. And the lines are being drawn based on where the camera is. So if I click 0 on my numpad to go into camera view, you can see what lines we have. So I want the lines on all of the crisscross sections. So under the modifier, I'm going to click edge type. So contour is the outside of the pot. So if I click that off, you can see the outsides disappear. Intersections aren't really affecting our pot at the moment because there's no geometry intersecting the pot. So I can turn that off. Edge marks, we haven't added any edge marks to that, so I can turn that off. And loose would be like if you had a polygon and you deleted one of the lines, so you don't have a complete polygon, you only have 3 of the lines, then it would show on that. So we don't need that either. So to get the lines on the pot, I need to increase the crease threshold. And you can see as that increases, the lines start to form. So there we have our lines. And we're at render, so you can see those. Okay, I may make some adjustments to this as we add additional information, but for now, I'll leave it as is. So I'm going to hit 1 on my numpad to go to front view. For now, I'll turn off the grease pencil lines by clicking this eyeball, and that'll turn those off. Then I'm going to go back to viewport shading solid. I'm going to Shift A, and I'm going to add a mesh cylinder. I'm going to turn on X-ray mode. I'm going to grab the cylinder and hit S and Z to scale it down to the Z-axis. I'm going to get that really small. I'm going to G on my numpad and Z to bring it up in the Z-axis. I'm going to turn off X-ray mode. And you can see that's intersecting the pot, but it's not coming on the outside of the pot. So this will just be the flat soil. And there is a reason I'm adding this beyond just the soil. I want to use its origin for the plant stems. So I'll show you what that means in a second. So you can see up here in the top right in this menu for location that now that I've moved this, the locations aren't zeroed out. So I want to reset that so everything's to 0. And this helps with like modeling and using deformers and things like that. So I want to hit Control A. You can see we have apply menu come up and you can pick what you want to apply. Location, rotation, scale. I'm just going to pick all transforms. So now you can see these are all zeroed out. Also, you can see I had miscellaneous as a collection selected when I added that. So I'm going to pull the cylinder down into the asset collection. I'm going to double click on it and change it to soil. Now I want to create my first stem. To do that, I want to hit Shift A to bring up the add menu, select mesh and hit plane. So you have this pop-up add plane. So I'm going to click into rotation X and change that to 90. And I'll click into the viewport to get rid of that. I'm going to click on the object, hit G and Z to bring that up in the Z axis. I'm going to hit SX to scale on the X axis. And then I'll hit SZ to scale it up into the Z axis. I'm going to SX again to bring that up a little bit. So I'm going to click on that, turn on X-ray mode, and I'm going to bring this up to the soil level. So I'm at GZ. I can see that. So I'm going to come out of X-ray mode, and I had the wrong collection selected again. So I'm going to pull plane down into asset and change that to stem 1. So I'm going to temporarily turn off the soil in the pot, and I'm going to go into edit mode. And we'll go to edge mode. I'm going to left click and drag to select that bottom edge. I'm going to Shift S, cursor to selected. I'm going to come back to object mode, and I'm going to go to object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor. So now the origin of this is at the bottom, so it'll be at the same level as the soil. So again, if I hit scale, I'm scaling it down to where it's originating from. So now it's always going to be transformed from where it is in the dirt. So we're in the modifiers panel. I'm going to click on add modifier and choose subdivision surface. So you can see what that does to the plane when I don't have any loops or things like that in it. So I'm going to turn the render setting down to 1. So I have 1 on in the viewport and in the render. I'm going to click tab. I'm going to select my loop cut. So you can see I have this yellow line now. So I'm going to click but not let up, and I'm going to drag down. So I'm going to set one in the middle. So now I'm going to grab my select box. Then we'll go to vertex mode, left click and drag to select all these vertexes. Hit SX to scale on the X axis, and I'll bring that in a little bit because I want the middle to be a little wider than the bottom or the top. So I'll click loop cut again. We'll add another loop cut here, here, and here because I want this to be able to bend quite a bit. So I'm going to do that again. Now I'm going to go to the top and add some loop cuts there. Now this one I'm going to left click and then drag because I don't want it affecting the tip too much. I'll go back to my box select the top geometry, hit S and X to scale on the X axis. Okay, we should be able to get a good bend out of that. I'm actually going to increase the viewport levels to 2 and 2 on the render. I'm actually going to go to 3 to make that as smooth as possible, so you can see what that looks like. One thing to keep in mind about Blender using grease pencil is that if you want to add lines to objects to create a cartoon look, the best way to do that is to keep the object as simple as possible. So you can see even though this stalk or stem doesn't have any geometry to it, my line looks good against it because Blender is adding it to that edge, and that's the only edge there is. To get a better idea of that, I'm going to click on the camera because the lines are being generated based on where the camera is. I'm going to hit GZ to bring that up, and you can see the line being added to the object. So if I scroll in, you can see I have a very clear line around my stem. So again, if you're adding lines, sometimes the simpler an object is, the better it works. So I think that shape looks good. I want to turn off the lines temporarily. Now to give this a little shape, I want to go to my modifiers panel and select simple deform. Now it's currently set to twist, so I'm going to set that to bend. And I'll click on the origin. This lets me choose an object from which the bending is taking place. So I'm going to choose the soil. And now you can see it's bending from that spot, which is what I wanted. So I can left click and drag to change that angle some. Then I'm going to click on stem and hit GY to bring that over in the Y axis. And I may raise that up just a little bit. Now I'm going to click on add modifier and add a simple deform again. So this time I'm going to leave it set to twist. I'm going to change the origin to soil. And I'm going to change the twist amount quite a bit. So maybe just 2. So you can see that just gives it a little bit of a shape. Actually change it to 3. So that's what it looks like. So if I zero my numpad, you can see I go to camera view, and then I'll turn back on my lines. You can see, let me render this. So now I'm going to go to 7 on my numpad to come for an overhead shot. And with that selected, I'm going to hit Shift D and then left click to drop it. I'm going to change the name to stem 2. I'm going to hit G to grab it, and then I'll hit R to rotate it, G to grab it a little bit more, G to bring it in a little bit. So now I want to adjust that twist, and then I want to adjust the simple deform. I'm going to change the axis to Y. So there's our second stalk. Now we'll hit S, and you see I'm scaling from the bottom now, which is what I wanted, so I'm going to bring that up just a little bit. So I'm going to Shift D again and click Y to constrain to the Y axis and bring that over. Hit 7 to go to overhead, G to bring that in just a little bit. And then we hit S to scale that up. I'm actually going to hit G again and bring it a little closer to the middle because it's going to be a taller piece. Up here at the top under transform orientations, I can go to local, and then from the show gizmos, I can click that and turn on move, rotation, and scale. So I'm going to scale this in to make it a little bit thinner. I'm going to scale it up a little bit. And I'm going to change the angle of the deform some. I'm going to change the axis to Y. And on the twist, I'm going to change that a little bit. So you can see what that looks like. Now I'll click on my stem number 1, 2, 3, and I'll hit Shift D and then left click to drop them. Then I'll use my gizmo to turn these around. You can see those modifiers are affecting that, but I'll address that in a second. And we'll bring those over. And I'll left click this one. Now I'll double click and change stem point 1, 2, 3. I'll change these other ones to number those. So now I'll click on each one and adjust the modifiers, and I'll probably speed this section up because this will just be me adjusting the twist and the bend. So I'll be right back. I've adjusted those and I've decided I want to add a couple more. So I'm going to rearrange these a bit to bring them more out to the edge of the pot. Okay, we'll select all of these, left click and then shift to select the others. Now hit Shift D to duplicate those. I'll click in the viewport to drop them. Then I'll hit scale to bring those in a little. And then I'll hit scale to scale those up. I'll hit scale again, make those a bit wider. And I'll hit SZ to bring them down in height. Now I'll renumber those and I'll speed that up and then I'll rearrange them a bit. Okay, so I just rendered that and that's what it looks like. I think it looks pretty good. I want to change the view for my camera though. So I'm going to click it and I've got my gizmos enabled right here. I'll bring this down. So let me render that one more time. All right, so the next thing I want to do is add the colors. So I want to do that with the cartoon shader. So I'm going to click off of this, drag my timeline up. I'll start with the pot. So in my timeline, if I left click this icon, I can change this to shader editor. And I currently don't have a material here, so nothing's being shown. So I'm gonna go to my material tab while I've got the pot selected and click new. So now you can see in the nodes view, I have a material created. So I'm gonna click on that and name it pot. You can also see that up here. So I'm gonna left click and drag the materials output node because I'm gonna add a couple of nodes in between. The first one I'm gonna add is shader to RGB. So click Shift A in the search, type in shader. Left click shader to RGB and just drop that. And you can see the line between those is currently green. If I hover over that, it turns white. So if I left click and drop it there, it'll automatically connect it. So I'll do the same thing with the color ramp. I'll hit Shift A, search color, click ramp, hover that over till it turns white, left click, drop it. So I'll go up here to my material preview and look at that. And currently you can't see anything because everything is set to white. So I'm gonna left click on the right color tab and bring that over here on the color ramp. And I want to click into that and just change this to a color. And we can change these later, but I'm just going to pick this for now. So let's see. Then I'll click on this one, which is currently black, and I want to change it to a darker yellow. You can't really see anything right now, so I want to change this where it says linear to constant. Now you can see we've got a bit of shading going on. So I'm going to be in the camera view when I do this. So we can't currently see this because it's happening on the back side. But we can adjust where that occurs. So I add two more nodes. So Shift A, search, texture coordinate. I'm going to drop that here, add another one, Shift A, search mapping. I'm going to connect generated to vector on the mapping, and from the mapping, connect vector to base color. So the node texture coordinate is connected to the mapping node. So from the mapping node, we can determine where the shader will show up on the object. So let me hit 0 to go back to camera mode. Now you can see we've got the shading where I want it. But say you didn't, you could change the rotations to adjust that. You can change the location to where it's occurring on the model. You can also change how big it is. So I think I'll leave this here for now. So I'm going to change this to 10, 25, and 12. So now I want to add the same shader to the stems. So I'm going to select a stem. Then I want to go to the drop down here, and you can see I have the pot material. So I'm going to select that. Then right here is a duplicate material option. So I'm going to click that to create a new material. So you can see I duplicated the pot one, and I'm going to change this to stem. Now all I need to do is change these yellows to a green. Now you can see I've got this material added to one of the stems, and that's right here. So I'm going to add this to the rest of them. To do that, over in the outline, I'm going to click stem number 2, holding shift, I want to click stem number 3. Then I want to hold control and click stem number 1. Stem number 1 is the one that has the material, so I want to click it last. So I've selected everything but it, and then I've selected it last. Now I'll hit Control L, and I'll select Link Materials. And now you can see that's applied that material to all of them at once. So if I wanted to, I could adjust this to kind of change how the shadows look. I could also change the rotation a bit. Okay, I think that looks good. And again, if you needed to make any specific adjustments, you could. If you wanted to change each individual material because you wanted a shadow to look a certain way, you could duplicate the material. And then now that you've applied it and duplicated it, you can change it here in the color ramp or in the mapping, and it would change it just for that stem. I think for now, I'll leave mine as it is. I may go to the pot and adjust this back a little bit. So let me click on this and bring it over. So you can see if I render this, the shadows aren't exactly the same as they are in the material viewport. So if I click on the render tab, then I can see what those accurately look like. So I'm going to click on the pot again, and I am going to adjust the color ramp slightly. I think that looks good. So let me click on one of the stems since I've still got all those linked and drag those a little bit. And I may adjust the location and the rotation. So right now you can see the stems look like the shadows on the right, but the pot is on the left. So to fix that, I want to reverse the color ramp by clicking and dragging one of the tabs this way and then bringing the other one back. Now I want to add a simple sky to this. So to do that, if you look on the right, you can see this is World tab, and our background is currently this gray color. That's what you see in the viewport. So I can actually change that from the node view. So if I click over here where it says object, which is where I've been working, I can click on world, and now you can see our world nodes. So I want it like a blue sky, kind of a gradient. So to do that, I'm going to add a couple of nodes here. So I'm going to hit Shift A, search texture coordinate, drop that. I'm going to add a mapping node again. Click that. So to make this look like a sky, I want a gradient. So I'm going to hit Shift A, search gradient, texture, drop that in. Now I want a color ramp to control what that gradient's colors are. So Shift A, search color ramp. And then I'll leave the background because that's what these colors are going to channel into. So the texture coordinate, I'll connect that to the vector on the mapping. And then for the mapping, the vector to vector on the gradient. And then from color to factor on the color ramp, color to color on the background. So you can see now we currently have our color. So within the color ramp, which is going to control all these colors, I'm going to left click and drag this white down. And instead of linear, I'm going to change this to B-spline, which is going to give us the gradient. So now if I were to left click and drag this black, you can see we're starting to get a gradient, but it's on the side and not the top down. So to fix that, I want to rotate this in the Y by 90. Or to better give you an example, if I left click and drag in the Y, you can see it starting to turn. So I'll left click in it and hit 90, and now you can see where it needs to be. But to get this more like we want, I want the light color at the bottom and the darker color at the top. I'll bring that down to about right here. I'm going to left click in the color and change it to blue. So I'll leave the white where it is and hit the plus symbol to create a new one. Click in there, change its color to a lighter blue. Okay, and I can adjust where that's at with these sliders. You know, the closer I get to each color tab, the more perfect that line is. So to get a good gradient, you need to keep them kind of apart. Now, I'm not getting a lot of the blue in the scene, so I should be able to change that with the location. You can see as I drag that around. So I'll leave it at that. Let me hit render to see what that looks like. So now we have a sky. So I'm going to add a couple of simple clouds. So to do that, I'm going to click into my miscellaneous collection, hit Shift A, grease pencil, blank. I'm going to double click on that name and change it to clouds. And from the grease pencil clouds, if I go down here to the materials tab, you can see I'm currently in stroke. I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to click fill to add fill, and then I'm going to click into the base color, change the alpha to 1, and I'll bring this up and change the color to white. So up to the top left, I'm going to click in and change it to draw mode, and then I want to choose the circle. Now I'm going to left click and drag to create a circle, then enter to finalize it, but you can see it looks odd. And that's because if I go to the clouds grease pencil object, click on the grease pencil properties, use light is selected. So if I uncheck that, you can see it's turning white. And that's because the light from the sun is currently affecting that, giving it shadows. And I don't want any of that. I just want it to be unaffected and just solid white. I may bring the white down just a bit so it isn't so bright, like about there. So now I can just left click and drag to kind of create a cloud shape. I'm going to go to object mode. I'm at S to scale that. G to grab it, bring it up here. So we'll go to object, set orientation to geometry, and then scale it up a little more, hit G to grab it and bring it down. Now if I render this, you can see the cloud is intersecting with the plant. And that's because I need to go to the view layer properties. In here under data, if you select Z, and if I render it now, you can see it's still intersecting those, but that's because if I scroll out, you can see it's actually in those. So if I pull this back now, you won't get that intersection. So let me render that again. And now everything looks correct. So instead of creating a new cloud, I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate this, bring this over to this side, and we'll rotate it by 180 degrees in the Z. I want to scale it in the Z to kind of smush it down, scale it this way a bit, render that. Okay, I may click on cloud texture, change that to like just barely a blue. See what that looks like. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. I'm actually going to move the camera a little bit so the plant isn't actually in the middle of the scene. So one thing I want to note is that you can see now if I want to move this straight across to the left, my arrows don't show how to do that. And that's because they're oriented to the global origin. If I go to transform orientations and change it to local, you can see that snaps now to the local or the object orientation. And now I can just easily bring that over. And then I'm going to turn that. Okay, now I'm going to bring the clouds over a bit. Bring this one over, render that. I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate that, grab it, bring it down, scale that down. Another option you could have here would be if you want to take that and then go to Sculpt mode, and I'm going to click the grab brush, increase the size of that. I could like further manipulate this a bit to make it look a little different. Now if I click smooth, I can smooth that out. Okay, let me render this. And you see I pulled the cloud forward, so now it's intersecting with land again. So I need to go to object mode, grab that, bring it back. 0 to go to camera view, render. So I'm not getting any shadows on my pot now, and that's because the world view is affecting the pot. So if I go to object, I can left click and drag this a little bit. Now you see I've got that back. Can also change the rotation if I want to get that look. Okay, I could quickly add a table to this. I could hit 7 on my numpad to go to top view, hit Shift A, mesh, cube. Let me bring this out, up, and I don't want it sitting right on the middle of it. Come around, just that. Bring that down to where it's sitting on it. And currently it's in the miscellaneous tab, so I'm going to bring that down to assets, change the name to table. From underneath it, I want to hit tab to go into edit mode. I want to go to face mode, select the face. Now I want to right click and choose inset face and drag to create that. And with that still selected, I want to take this scale and bring it down so it's more even all the way around. Actually, I want to hit S and scale that back out and then fix that a little bit. So now I'll right click and hit extrude faces and bring that down. Okay, now I'm going to top mode. I'll hit Shift A again, bring in a cube, grab that and bring it over here for a leg. Hit S to scale that. G to grab it, bring it over. Go to camera view, bring that down. Now hit S and Z to scale in the Z axis. Now bring that down. 7 on my numpad. I'm gonna go to X-ray mode. Shift D, drop it, and then drag it over. Now I left click and grab them both. Hit Shift D to drop, and then click to drop them. Bring those over. Go back to camera view by hitting 0 on my numpad. Then you go to object mode and then rotate this around. Pull that forward so it's sitting on that. Bring it over. I'm going to click my camera and hit G to grab it. And I'm going to bring it over a bit. The last thing I want to do is with the table selected, I'm going to click this drop down here to select pot. Then I'll hit this duplicate, click in here and change it to table. So now all I need to do is change these colors to a brown. Now let me hit render, see what that looks like. Okay, one other thing you could do if you really wanted to add some texture to this quickly, you could just go to Shift A, grease pencil, blank object. I want to click on here and name it texture. Then we'll go to draw mode, and up here at the top where it says origin, I can click surface, and this offset is how far away the stroke will be from the surface. So I'm going to click into there and change that to 0.015. I'll click on the draw tool. I'm going to turn off pin pressure on both of these and raise the strength to 1. And you could just draw like some, wood grain textures on here. Render this. I'm not a huge fan of that. Let me click on the textures, and I'm going to go to stroke, and I'm going to change the alpha a bit just to kind of dull it down a little. Okay, so there's our final picture. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If so, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Oh, one note, I just realized I did not save this at any point during this. So don't make my mistake and save your files as you go. Thanks again.